Caitlin Hopkins is on, everybody.
That. All right, welcome. Welcome to the SDSU Studio Series. This is the pilot version of this program, and we're very, very happy to be offering it to all of you. In the midst of what's happening in the world today, we've created this series of conversations with Broadway professionals where we talk about the craft and the business of Broadway and how we can pass along this legacy to the next generation of musical theater artists. This SDSU Studio Series is organized by the SDSU MFA Musical Theatre Program. This program is one of only a handful of graduate degrees offered in the United States that offer the terminal degree in musical theater. And our graduates are acting, directing, choreographing, music directing, writing, and teaching in university positions worldwide. Our goal is to bring the professional world and the academic world together so the students of musical theater are prepared for today's job market. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Robert Meff. I worked as a professional conductor, music director, and orchestrator on Broadway for 22 years before moving to San Diego to become the head of the MFA Musical Theatre Program. My goal in life is to enable every person who wants to be a musical theater artist to be able to access what is going on in the professional world, which led me to creating this series and leads me to my first guest, Tara Rubin. Welcome, Tara.
Thank you. I got a little emotional seeing all those people, coming on. It was really neat.
It's really great. I'm so glad. We're up to 124, so this is great. Before we begin, I want to give a few expectations of today's discussion for everybody. Since this is the pilot episode of the series, we are still working on the technology of how it functions. So for everyone out there listening, make sure your microphone is turned off. If you have questions, feel free to use the chat function on the right side of your screen. And after my questions with Tara, or my questions are completed, I will ask her questions from your submissions on the chat. If I disappear from your screen for more than 20 seconds or so, it means that there's some kind of malfunction on my side. It's unlikely, but it's possible. If that happens, you should leave the meeting, wait 2 minutes, and then rejoin the meeting. We'll pick up right where we left off. Cool with everybody? Great. So let's begin. Tara Rubin is one of New York City's finest casting directors. Her agency, Tara Rubin Casting, was founded in 2001. And it's behind some of Broadway's biggest shows, like The Phantom of the Opera, Dear Evan Hansen, Mamma Mia, and you can't even count how many others. Before founding her own agency, she worked with the Johnson Liff casting agency, which is where I met Tara while working on the Broadway production of Les Miserables. But before I ask you about your career, Tara, I'd like to start with right now. The University Musical Theater community is adapting to the coronavirus outbreak by migrating classes online and providing content like this interview to students and educators nationwide. How is Broadway coping, and how are you coping?
Well, it's a challenging time for everybody, and I think because it goes across the board, actors, directors. I was talking to one of the board members of the SDC, and he was telling me 2,000 people from his organization are now out of work. And so I keep being reminded of how far-reaching this is. And then I read about Los Angeles and a company town basically shut down by the end of production. So I think that the best thing we can do is, what the Broadway community always does, is do it all together, try to support each other as much as possible. The Casting Society put together, we spent yesterday and the day before putting together a list of resources, unemployment information, different loans and grants and things that might be available to people. I think, and directing people to the Actors Fund and to, just trying to get resources together for our people. So that was sort of the first thing that we did. And now we're trying to come up with something that we can do that might be like fundraising, but it's very hard to think of something to do. If anyone has a great suggestion, please send it my way, because it's really hard to ask our community to fund anything right now when everyone's financial situation is so uncertain. So we're kind of grappling with that right now. We're trying to come up with something creative that we might be able to do to help the cause. And then personally, I'm just trying to keep the projects that I have going that I think, you know, for next year, and just trying to stay engaged in what I can do. And I'm a pilot.
Yes. Any advice for keeping a schedule while you're at home?
That is really that's a very good question. And the first 2 days were better than the third one, you know. But yeah, I have been getting up and the problem is Rob and I were talking, when you work from home, you never know when to end. Like, and when I'm at the office, I know I have to go to the theater at 7 o'clock, or, you know, but like we could literally work around the clock. So I have to figure out how to schedule that a little better.
That's true. Well, and thank you so much for appearing today and joining all of us. It means a lot to all of us in the university musical theater community.
It's really a pleasure.
Great. So let's go back. You started out with Johnson Lift Casting Agency in the boom years of the British invasion musicals like Cats, Les Miserables, Phantom of the Opera. How did you get started?
I started off as a casting assistant, and I was back then. The differentiation between a casting assistant and a casting associate and a casting director in our small office, it was quite blurred. So I sat at the front desk for 5 years, and you know, I did casting work, I did associate work. I would go off and I would cast some days, and then I'd come back and be like, hope I don't have to do that again tomorrow. Let me just be the assistant for another day. So I had, you know, such great training there, because Vinny and Jeff were really pioneers as independent casting directors. And they also were pioneers in, I think, the long running show and how to maintain, you know, quality, and how to maintain as close as possible what was on opening night, and you know, keep that, make that show the show that the people were going to be seeing 5 years later.
All right, I want to follow up with that. Like, what were some of the pioneering techniques? I mean, that's completely, knowing that was the advent of the super long running show. What were some of the techniques that were pioneering?
Holding auditions outside of New York City, and you know, holding frequent auditions in New York City, but going to other markets, going to LA, going to Chicago, going to Toronto. That was a big thing. And then maintaining you know, an organized filing system for you know, those auditions. So, oh, that guy in Chicago, he might be, you know, the old Deuteronomy understudy. Let's see where he is now. And so that was one of the things. Also, I think recognizing potential, because you knew that you needed, let's say, 12 guys who could sing Jean Valjean at any time, because you would have to have 3 in each company. And so maybe we had 4 companies. So Vinny was great at recognizing that this young man is going to be a great Jean Valjean, even though he's 26 and, you know, somewhat inexperienced or whatever. And so that person would come into the company in one of the ensemble roles and develop up into the part. So I think those were, I feel that I learned those things from them. And I don't think anyone else was really doing that much, because there weren't that many productions that had multiple companies.
Yes, it seems like you were looking at people's careers rather than the slot they needed to fit in at that moment.
Absolutely. And I think we understood, and this is something that I hang on to is, and try to, I hope my staff has been able to continue to do that, which is that you see the long game with an actor. And I always say it's sort of like having a file folder. And every time you see an actor either in a show or come into audition, you're adding one more piece of paper into that file. And so oftentimes it's like, oh, I didn't realize that she sang soprano like that, or I didn't realize he could be that funny, or whatever it is. And so that you really do think about the career being like an active, growing entity, rather than just what you're seeing that one day in the rehearsal room, in the audition room.
Well, it's great advice for musical theater performers who don't necessarily book every job that they get, to know that it's every audition matters.
It does, and every audition just gives you gives us an opportunity to know a little bit more about each other. I always say, you know, in the very early days, when what happens to you in the room, what happens between us in the room is the only thing I know about you. So like if you have a sneezing fit, you're sneezing guy for a while until I know more about you. And then, you know, of course that goes away. So the more you get to know an actor, the more almost like latitude you give them. It's like because if somebody does something kind of crazy or unexpected or like maybe slightly inappropriate, you think like, what was that? You know, but because you have like so much more information about it. But that's why I always encourage early career people to really kind of think of it as a job interview, especially in the early days, because we're just learning about you, you know, step by step by step.
Right, definitely. Well, I going back to your earlier point, I remember your agency going to Utah to audition at Brigham Young, because there was this amazing voice teacher at Brigham Young that really taught women how to belt. And Claude Michel loved the sound, and you guys were always there. It was,
yes.
And we always sold out Salt Lake City. It was crazy.
Yeah, they love moves there.
So you talked a little bit about what the casting process was like then. How has it changed over the years? What is it like now? What are the biggest differences, and what do you see as trends?
Well, I think we have so many more resources available to us in terms of, well, a couple of things. You know, we can, just the whole online thing, you know, we have access to, we can look at the people who are in musical theater programs who are still in their training. We find them online. That has been a big resource for casting Dear Evan Hansen, the colleges going to the programs, and the forbearance that the people who run those programs have you know, and that they have borne us has been amazing, and we've been very grateful for the way they've participated with us in casting Dear Evan Hansen. You know, it was not allowed for actors to tape auditions. Now we can tape auditions, and we go through thousands of tapes a week sometimes, you know, on different projects. So there's that. Actors have websites. I love looking at websites. Sometimes, you know, you just learn things about people. So that it's just, there's so many more resources available to us. And I can do research that I used to do basically in Theater Index. Was kind of like that's if I thought, wait, this guy would be the kind of guy who would have been in, you know, Ain't Misbehavin'. And so I could look up, but I had to look it up in the Theater Index, all the people who had played that. Now that is available to me in a second. So that's really great too. The research resources to us, you know, are very good.
Yeah, I wanted to expand on that point a little bit. This is rather an obvious question, and how important is an actor's online profile? Like when you Google their name and what comes up, how important is that? There you go, easy question, easy answer.
Yeah, I mean, not to put too much emphasis on it, but it sort of goes back to the earlier part of this conversation where, it is sort of a job interview. And so the things that are accessible to us online that's all we know about you at first. So if, we hope that, that people aren't, I don't like people to be harshly judgmental. And I have to tell the young people in my office this sometimes, that like, so somebody put something up that was really, he shouldn't have done that, or she shouldn't have done that. But we're all living and growing through the whole internet thing and trying to figure it all out. So I would rather not harshly judge you for something that that you have online, and hope that you will live and grow through it and begin to modify in a more professional way.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, has there been a situation where, let's say, you're behind the table and you have the creative team there, maybe the director and choreographer, music director, maybe the authors, and at the end of the day, someone says, "Hey, have you heard about so-and-so?" Does it ever happen that they just sit right there and Google so-and-so and it pops up and that's their audition for the day? Does that happen?
It's not, oh, you mean not someone who we just saw, but someone in,
yeah, someone had an idea that maybe you hadn't brought in, or maybe was unavailable to come in that day.
Yeah, I mean, we do use online content to introduce actors to our creative team. Sometimes we use it as a substitute. It's hardly ever a substitute for actually casting someone. We would see a clip and then say, yes, let's pursue him, or, let's have her come in next time, or she'll come to the final auditions or whatever. But so in the theater, at least, it's uncommon to cast someone from a tape. But
of course,
but it has become a big part of our process.
Okay. Great. I'm going to move on to my next question here, and back up a little. We were getting very specific about things, but I want to have a larger picture about this. Many people probably don't even know what a casting director does, and there are probably a lot of misconceptions about what a casting director does. Can you just briefly explain your exact role when in casting a show, like a timeline and what you do?
Yes. So I'm hired by a producer to cast a show. And let's say that we'll as an example, we'll use an original, it's a brand new musical. It's called Rob Meth, and I'm the casting director. And
that's the most boring musical that will ever be written, but thank you.
The pioneer in this kind of field. And so I'm hired by a producer. I either meet with the director, have some sort of creative conversation with the director, and begin to, for me, I always think of it as like, I try to figure out the people who are the right people to tell the story. Are they in muted colors? Are they in bold colors? Are they, are they how big, how small in terms of like the size of their acting?
And you get this from from the director, or from the creative team, or a combination of both? What's the conversation like?
And from the text,
Okay.
and sometimes I have to ask, because like a lot of postmodern texts that are, there's a certain neutrality to the writing that I really need guidance on. Like, I'm seeing these types of people telling this story, but I might be wrong, or I might be guided in, a more nuanced direction or whatever.
Right. You maybe thought Evan Hansen was telling the truth.
So there's that phase of like understanding what it's going to be, and for us to begin to think about, so who are those people? And then we have the round of auditions that we're required to have by the producer's agreement with Actors Equity. So there's an agreement between that union and the producers and the League of Broadway Theaters that we will see 3 days of EPAs, equity principal auditions. And so any union member who wants to come in to audition can sign up and audition for the show. And we have a chorus call for singers and a chorus call for dancers if it's musical, and we're saying it's musical. So so we do that. Then we begin to have auditions with oftentimes we'll have auditions with an associate team first, and those associates are people, they're young, usually early career, or somebody who's worked with a director for a very long time and understands his taste, sensibility, expectations for what the casting process should be. So sometimes we will do auditions with that person first, and then we have final auditions with the director, the full team, and then the show is cast. And then if it continues to run on Broadway, we are hired we stay on and we continue to maintain the show. So when people leave, we replace them. When people are, if there's an additional company, we cast that company. So we begin kind of a relationship. I mean, if you think about things like Les Mis and Phantom of the Opera, we have had that relationship for over 30 years.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Well, the people that have gone through during my time at Les Mis are some of the most extraordinarily talented people I've ever worked with. So you guys are amazing. I want to pick up on that a little bit. To say, like, what is the collaboration? What's the do you have direct collaboration with the director? And how much interface is there? Is it the director with you? Is it the associates with your associates? Like, what happens there?
It's different with every project. Some directors really do relate to us like actual creative collaborators on the project, and they are, keenly aware that we are there as sort of like the experts on the actors. Like, we know who all those people are, and they know that we don't really know who all those people are, but that we're constantly trying to know, as many actors as we possibly can, knowing that we never will really accomplish that goal. So some directors are quite involved with us. They love some directors love auditions. Some directors are, prefer to only see a few people. It's a different kind of trust. It's like, we trust you and my associates to get this to the point where I'm seeing the people who you all think are most likely to be cast and are most like the people that I want to work with, or I want to help me tell my story.
Well, that's an interesting point. How much does it play into an actor's workability, like their attitudes toward their work, and their ability to show up on time and be prepared, as opposed to just raw talent? You take that into consideration?
Yes, and I'm big on, like, look how great he is right now, and let's give this person an opportunity. Where I know that what an actor may have done in the past is might be something that we have to consider. I always hope that there were circumstances that create circumstances that made that person maybe less than her best or his best self, and that we can move on. But the music directors and the associate directors and the stage managers, who are the people who really worked with those actors all the time, they're the ones who seem less likely to forget about work ethic and things like that. And that makes sense, doesn't it? That they're the people. So they're the people whose jobs were most affected by someone's behavior, someone's work ethic. So I always encourage people to think of it like, treating someone the way you would want to be treated is never more important than in the theater, where everything is about us all coming together. Everything is about, you've worked your whole life for this opportunity to be in a play. Like, why would you not want to be on your, in your best, on your best form in the rehearsal process and in the performance process. This is what it was all about, is getting to that place. So a great work ethic is, it's just expected. It's Broadway, it's expected that you're going to be, that you're going to do your best, and that you'll be kind to others. Like nothing else is acceptable. In a way.
Is true.
That's a standard that we have every right to expect, decency, kindness, and hard work.
Yes, I before I took my position here at San Diego State, I used to work at Pace University. And for those of you out there that know Amy Rogers, you very much know her motto, which is, don't be an asshole. So I'll just leave that there for everybody. But I had a question about that, and this is a question I actually don't know. I should only ask questions I do know, but I'm gonna answer.
I'm not on the witness stand, anyway. So it's okay.
I know, it's true. My father was a lawyer. I can't help it. The question is, who writes the descriptions of the roles, and does that vary? Where does that information come from? Because sometimes in other casting agencies, I won't name who, they can be a little vague. And I know that the 142 people out there are going to nod their heads at that. So who writes those, and how does it vary? Does it vary between different groups?
It does vary. Oftentimes the writer, if the writer is living, will write those. Sometimes we put it together from like character descriptions within the text. It will, I'll pull something together from, whatever is how the characters are described. But we always submit it for approval. We don't just write it ourselves and send it out into the world. And sometimes the director wants to have a hand in how the breakdown, how the characters are described. I actually love vague descriptions, and here's why. Because number one, it makes the agents submit more people, and that in turn might stimulate my imagination in a way that I hadn't thought. Right? So, someone submits somebody who is just kind of outside of what I'm imagining, and I think, whoa, we ought to go down this, we ought to take a look here and see what that might be like if that person played the part. It also doesn't really make all that much difference. If there's something that is absolutely important for an actor to know about a character, I hope that that information will be in the breakdown, in the character description. But most of the time, we're looking for a lot more imagination than I think actors realize. I think early career people think that if they've made the words their own, if they can sing the notes perfectly, and if they, have a sense of it, that's what they should bring into the room. And that may be because they want to be a blank slate and they want, the director to give them notes or to give them ideas. But we're actually very interested in your ideas. And I want to see what you think about this person that you're going to be creating, and you may be a little bit off, but we can work with that. But I'm inspired by the imaginative ways that actors work. And I have seen what the excitement that happens in the audition room when an actor has brought something in, and you can tell the director may not admit it, but that might not have really thought about that before. And so suddenly you have like two artists really working together and creating something. And so the character description is just a starting point for the rest of it.
Right. So a good description is deliberately vague, so it's a big umbrella, so it reaches more people and more people's imagination. I love that.
I mean, if there's, I have read very long character descriptions that have been absolutely brilliant and absolutely helpful, you know, if it's whatever it is. But I guess a more accurate way to describe what I'm thinking is it's not necessary. The work that you need to do in order to come in and have an exciting audition is not in the character description. It's in your imagination.
Right. So have you ever convinced a director to look beyond the type they were looking for in a role? And how did you accomplish changing their mind? Did that ever happen?
Yes, it happens. It happens frequently. Nobody likes for someone to say, let me change your mind about that. So I think casting directors go about it in a different way.
You're nothing but diplomatic.
Something that is like I will always try to make it seem like it was somebody else's idea, because it goes over much better that way, you know? So if it's like a matter of like photo and resume on the table and then, you know, kind of seeing somebody pick that up and say, oh, wait, what about him? And then I can say, oh yeah, what about him? That's my
about that.
And then sometimes I just admit, like, you know, before an actor comes in, I'll say, I know this might be a little bit different, or sometimes I won't even preface it. I'll just have someone come in and either he is someone who, he is a candidate to play the part, or he isn't. But, you know, if the casting process is going well, there should be room for everybody to be looking a little bit beyond what they really think they're after, you know?
Right. How has the widening of the expectation of racial diversity in casting helped address this very question? Like, has that been something that's talked about, and do you think that's changed in the past 10 years?
Well, it hasn't changed enough, but it's changing, and that's a good thing. And I can honestly say that no casting process starts without a conversation about diversity in this day and age, in 2020, and for the past few years. And that making diversity a kind of core value of every project that we work on, and finding teams who share that value is, you know, that's a goal. That's something that we're striving for. And so it's just made the whole process more exciting, because, you know, we're all thinking beyond it, you know, with very few limitations. But we haven't gone far enough. And, you know, the very first meeting of the Casting Society of America that I went to, which was like 25 years ago, we had a presentation about it was called non-traditional casting.
All right.
And a department had been set up at Actors Equity, where photos and resumes of diverse actors would be collected, and it would be like a resource to the casting directors. And so, you know, when I think about that, I think, gosh, you know, we have been working toward this and not succeeding very well for a very long time. And fortunately, the process has accelerated in the last few years,
Sure.
but we're nowhere near where we need to be.
Yeah. Well, it's I think diversity is helped by people pitching in at every step of the way. So it's great to hear that casting agencies are on board and that creative teams are on board. And those of you out there in university land are trying to train more diverse workforce so that you have more options to bring people in. And it goes all the way back to high school and making sure people have the access to training and you know, and dealing with all of that. So I'm glad to see that progress is being made, and I agree with you. Not enough, but we're working toward it. All right, so I have another question. What do you see as the biggest obstacle that gets in the way of an actor in a room?
Well, a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
One is not being prepared enough. You know, I think I always say your preparation is sort of like your spine in an audition. It's going to hold you up. If you're really prepared, if you have sung a song 35 or 40 times, I guarantee you when you go in to sing that song at an audition, if you have a sore throat, or if you were delayed on the subway, or had an emotional issue the night before, the more prepared you are, the better off you will be. You'll be able to sing that song through thick and thin, and bring what's going on with you that day to it in some way, you know, to make it an exciting part of sharing who you are. So not being prepared is kind of like the hardest thing for me to understand, when I see, like, you worked your whole life for this, you know, you spent all those years in the dance studio, you took all those lessons, you got a BFA, you know, you did all these things, and here you are, and why aren't we a little bit better prepared for this moment? Because I know what everybody else at the table went through to get there. Like, I know what my office did to set up that audition, the hours of setting appointments, people dropping out, adding people in, all the details of preparing the materials so that they're organized and detailed and proper for the day. And I know that the director had to come in with, you know, ready to cast and ready to do his work or her work. So, you know, I always hope that people understand that you know, we want them to be prepared because we want to see what you have to share. And when someone is unprepared, I feel like I didn't get that. I don't know, like, you know, I don't really know who you are yet. And so it's sort of a wasted opportunity.
Right. So among our now 147 participants, thank you all, everybody out there for joining in. Many of us are actual educators. So there's several heads of programs that are out there, and myself. What can you tell us about making sure our students are prepared for the industry? You talk about preparation in auditions. So just do you have a short list of things? Like, you know, there's a lot of BFAs out there, a lot of people studying at the BA level, and we're, you know, trying to figure out what the professional world needs and what are the most important skills. We love to teach everything, but they're only 4 years. And we design these curricula so that we put our students through the steps, but we don't always know if they're effective. So what do you think?
I always admire the programs that seem to emphasize the individuality of a student, and that where I feel like a student has spent her time developing her talents truly to herself, that no one tried to make her someone, you know, someone that you think we want. I love programs that help artists, like that create people who understand that, you know, a life in the theater is a life in the theater. It's great, it's rewarding, it's fabulous, it's challenging, it's difficult, it's full of deprivations and disappointments. And so, you know, the whole self that can come in and see that as an artist's life rather than like the working actor's life, understanding that there's a lot that goes with it. There's a lot that goes with being an actor in New York City. I love young people who come out of programs who are prepared to live in the questions and not sort of feel like they have to, that they need answers, that, you know, this is the right way to do it. oftentimes when I do these kinds of things or I talk to people, I think people are so disappointed because they think they're going to get the secret, you know?
Right.
And I'm like, you're going to live in the questions, and but that's what's going to make your career brilliant, and that's what's going to be exciting to you. So I always say the only people to stay away from are the people who tell you that they have the answers, so that they know exactly what it's going to be like, and you have to do this, and you shouldn't do this, the shoulds, the shouldn'ts, the I knows. Those are the people who I'm always a little bit reluctant to get on board with, because I've seen in my own career that no one has the answers, and it's not about having the answers. It's about doing the work. It's about loving the work. It's about standing on the side of love, you know, in situations. So like, I hope that isn't too vague, but it really is what I think. And it really, you know, whatever a university program can do to make young people understand that they're getting into the most fabulous thing in the world, but you know, you're an artist, and so there's that too. So anything that helps with mental health, anything that helps with developing a full self, that, you know, you might be doing some other things besides acting that are exciting to you. The great thing about the theater is we can use everybody. You know, if you have something that you can do and you want to be in the theater, you're for us. So you know, so there's always something that people can do. So I hope that's not too vague, but that really is, I think, the best that y'all can be.
It is true. I'm very wary when I see the next 10 things you shouldn't do at an audition, or the 10 secrets to a successful career, because they seem very reductive, right? And I also feel like it gives a potential actor the wrong impression that if you do those 10 things, then you will be successful, like that there's a direct route to that. And I'm going to quote Amy Rogers again, just because she's amazing, which is one of her second motto, besides "don't be an asshole," is just because you can doesn't mean you should. Right? And it applies to so many things, from belting to politics. So, but it's true. I think that universities are responsible for giving people the wisdom to make the right choice, to know when to belt something or not, or and that there can be a different answer in two different circumstances, right? You know, and so it is vague, and rather than throw your hands up in the air, it's best to have the wisdom to make the right choices in that moment, right?
Yes, and I think to understand that those 10 things you should or shouldn't do are usually about superficial or aspects of the actor's life. They're about wardrobe, or they're about, you know, they're about things that no one ever didn't get a job because she wore the wrong thing, or because she stumbled as she walked into the room, or her voice cracked on a high note. No one ever didn't get a job for that reason. And so, can wardrobe help you? Yes. You know, dressing toward a character or dressing toward the world of the play, those kinds of things can be, we don't need costumes, but like those kinds of things can be enormously helpful, mostly because they orient the actor in the time and place that, you know, of the world of the play. But so, you know, those kinds of things, I think they have their place. But the real, what if you've given young actors like the core work, acting, singing, dancing, you know, some history of the theater, I think is good. Some, you know, I think just
I second that.
Pardon me?
I second that.
Yeah, you know, just some context and some history and some understanding is, I think, really great. And then, you know, developing taste, helping them along the way. Like, as you said, you know, just because you can, it doesn't mean you should. So that's a great way to, I think, help someone develop taste, isn't it? Like, oh, you know, that urge to do that doesn't necessarily need to be acted upon.
Yes, definitely. Okay, I have a couple other questions here. You talked about EPAs and chorus calls when you talked about the process. How worth are they going in for? What percentage of actors do you hire from these calls as opposed to agent and invited calls? How does that work?
Well, they're very important for maintaining a long-running show. So if you come to a chorus call or an EPA for a long-running show, and you have potential, you know, you're a potential candidate for that cast, you will be recalled. You will get a call back because we need the constant influx of people. You know, we need to be meeting new people to take on those parts or to go out on the tour or whatever. So for the long running shows, I think it's unbelievable. You would be so surprised. I'm terrible with numbers, so it could, I don't know. But a lot.
Sure.
Scientific enough.
Yeah.
And or quantitative enough. And then for an original company, we always say there is almost always at least one person who ends up in the show who came to either an EPA, a chorus, or a dance call. Oftentimes it's a dancer, somebody who came to the dance call, but you know what, the singers come through that way too. There's almost always somebody who we just met, and then, you know, he or she makes it all the way through the process.
Well, it makes sense because,
and great opportunities.
right. Well, I mean, that makes sense. When you're doing a new show, you have a whole creative team that has their associates, the actors that they like to work with, that they know. So those are going to be their first calls in. But once it moves to replacements and tours, the original creative team is not as involved. So that's where, you know, the heavy lifting comes in, and that's where people who aren't known by the creative team have a much better chance of getting cast. Is that right?
Right.
How often do you have work sessions with actors during the audition process? You talk about the callback situation, but walk me through that. Like, what are the steps of a callback? And let's say, for example, let's say you're hiring Christine, which I know is a multi-level platform, but talk us through, let's say you saw someone with potential at an EPA, and walk us through what happens before they get cast. I mean, no one gets hired right from an EPA to do Christine. I know that, but walk us through that.
So the steps would probably be that after the EPA, we might bring you back for a screening for our office, where we hear you sing material from the show. Perhaps you didn't sing, chances are you didn't sing from Phantom at the EPA. So we send you some Christine material, you prepare that and come in to sing for the casting director. Then you would probably come in and sing for the associates and the music department, and then you would probably have a work session where we would do scenes and a lot of attention would be paid to the work session is a combination of the understanding the nuances of the character and helping that individual artist create that character. And it's also very technical. This is the way we sing this song. This is the way so helping you almost the way a voice teacher would, rather, in addition to coaching you, we're also oftentimes going through the mechanics of singing that material. And then, we haven't done this since we lost Hal last summer, but we used to have auditions on the stage at the theater, and Hal would come and we'd sit in the house and he would see them. They usually would audition with the Christines would usually audition with the young man who's playing Raoul, maybe the understudy to that part. And so that doesn't happen very often. Mike Nichols had auditions on stage when I worked with him on Spamalot on another play. So it doesn't happen this much anymore. It's a very expensive process, but,
Sure.
but yeah. And you know what, you could go through that whole process and then we cast one of the other two people, you know, at that point, it's only 3 people, and we will still call you back. Like, you're still in our mix. Like, I was there and I still can't tell you why it went to the other person sometimes. Mm-hmm. You know, it's all so hard to describe or hard to pinpoint, but the chemistry between the actors might have been, you know, preferable between one artist over another, one actor over another. But very rarely, if you get that far, do you ever go completely out of our thinking, our radar for that role. So chances are you'll be called in again, and probably wouldn't repeat that entire process. Might do another work session. I'm sorry, I'm in my home.
No, it's okay. Do you need to get that?
No, I guess we'll just let it ring.
All right. While we wait, if everyone out there in listening land want to start thinking of questions to ask Tara, you can type them into the chat room. We're gonna. I have about maybe 10 more minutes of questions with Tara, and then we're going to open up into your questions too. So continue on there. So you were talking about the continuancy of a Christine call.
Yeah.
There you go.
Someone asking me a question.
Oh, no. It's, couldn't you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, we got a little cut off there. So, oh yes. Oh, I want to talk about Hal for a moment. I mean, what a legend of our lifetimes. And we were talking a little bit beforehand, before we started, about Hal. Can you just share some reminiscence of how he approached the mentoring process of being "quote unquote" Hal Prince?
I mean, I didn't know him very well. I didn't have a personal relationship with him, but I think we enjoyed working together in the limited time that we spent together. Whenever he would call you to his office, I always found it very hard to look him in the eye, because the walls were just covered with posters and photos, and like all I wanted to do was just, like, you know, take in everything that was on the walls. I found it very hard to talk to him in his office. But he was an incredible champion of early career people, and he was constantly sending me photos and resumes and sending me an email. Please meet this young woman. I hear she's fabulous. And sometimes I wasn't even aware of how that person came into his world. But he was a great champion of people coming up. He loved to go to the theater, and he always had strong opinions about things. He loved a lot of things. In fact, one of the most fun things was, I didn't even have any contact with him, but when I went to see Oklahoma, at the Daniel Fish Oklahoma at St. Anne's, he was there with Stephen Sondheim. Oh. And they were sitting side by side watching the show. And of course, I couldn't take my eyes off of them. And I kept watching how much they were enjoying it. And you know, he loved to see things be reinterpreted. And so he had a great appreciation of he had a project that he was working on. You know?
Right. Right. What a full circle moment. The two of them at Oklahoma.
Yeah, that was really neat.
If my memory serves correctly, they met at the opening of South Pacific, I think.
I think so, yeah. Way
back when. I may be wrong about it. My graduate students will correct me in about 1 minute.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you if you had a mentor yourself that you really admired, and what you learned from him or her in the business.
Well, it would definitely be, Jeff Johnson and Vinnie Liff. I
Sure.
worked for them for 15 years. And I think in addition to all the mechanics of casting, there are two things. The first they loved actors and they treated actors with great humanity. And no one ever came into a room and left not feeling like she'd had her opportunity to, do her best. And so that's, treating actors with respect and kindness and making sure that the audition room is a safe, confidential place for actors to do their work. That's something that I hope I've carried on, because I think that was very important to them. The other thing was, in those 5 years where I was the assistant sitting at the front desk and doing all those crazy things, I didn't think I could be a casting director. I didn't, because I didn't know all the trivia, all the history. I didn't know who all of Ethel Merman's understudies had been. I didn't know what closed in Cleveland, in 1964. And it seemed like I would never catch up. Like, even if I studied all day and all night, I would just never have all that arcane information that they had. And then I started to realize that that's one aspect of casting. But what a casting director needs to have is sensitivity, literary skills, a language to speak to directors and writers and actors, an openness to other people, a sense of diplomacy, those other things that I felt like I did have some of that, and I could develop those things while I continued to learn more about the history of the theater. And they really helped me with that. That like, no, you can be a casting director. It doesn't matter as much as you think it does, that you don't know everything.
Wow.
And in fact, you know so little.
It's true, the way I think any professional I've ever talked to has at one point in their life felt completely unprepared for the situation they found themselves in. And that's part of living in the questions, as
Yes,
you said before.
Absolutely.
Okay, before I move on to the cool questions coming in fast and furious from our readers, I'd like to take you on the Pivot questionnaire. These are 10 questions that originally came from a French series, Bouillon de Culture, hosted by Bernard Pivot, but they are better known as the questions that James Lipton asked at every guest at the end of his Inside the Actors Studio television show. I'm a huge fan of James Lipton. I'm not pretending to be James Lipton, but this is just an homage to Jim, who was a colleague at Pace University in the MFA program over there. So 10 questions here we'd like to know. So the first question is, what is your favorite word?
My favorite word is ineffable.
Oh,
because I think it's like, that's what casting directors do all the time. We try to match people up with that thing that you can't really say exactly what it is, but that quality that I go like this all the time, of like the lifey, the lifiness of people. And so I feel like ineffable kind of describes what casting directors do all day.
oh, and it's a lyric in the musical Cats.
Yes.
Which is actually the only reason I know what that word means. I know everything I know to musical theater, thank you. The second question is, what is your least favorite word?
Oh, well, I had to think about this one a little bit, but my least favorite word right now is curate. Because I think of curating as something that people do with art. And now, like, let me show you this cheese plate. It was curated, I've curated this, selection of sweaters. That's like my current pet peeve. It's the way that word is used.
Oh yeah, it's when people make something fancier than it really should be. All right, here we go. Number 3 is, what turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Well, creatively, I think it's the collaboration, and that's the part of my job that's the most exciting and the most interesting. That and half of the time I'm just observing it, but when you see music and dance and acting and text and vision all come together like that, that's very exciting to me. So that would be my creative stimulation. Spiritually, I think it's love, standing on the side of love. People who do that. If someone does that, they almost can't do anything that will make me upset. And what was the other one?
Emotionally.
Truth seekers, people who are seeking the truth and trying to live a truth. I'm emotionally attracted and satisfied by them.
So what turns you off?
Selfishness, I think. People who, and not even just selfishness, but people who have to turn everything into something about them.
Right. Narcissism. What is your favorite curse word?
Well, this is funny because I actually don't curse.
Good for you.
I do spell curse words.
Okay.
The kids in my office will laugh about that, but I'll say, oh, why does he have to be such a DICK about it? But I never say it.
Very good.
I don't really have a favorite one, but I do like to spell them.
No, that's great. I'm prone to use HE double toothpick myself. What sound or noise do you love?
I had to think about this because there's so many, but when I really thought about it, I love the sound of a train at night, when it has that kind of, you hear the whistle and the rush of the train go by. My grandmother lived in the country and it was near the train track, and there's something so sort of, it's kind of lonely and, but there's just some beauty in it. There's something melancholy, but really, it reminds me of my childhood. It's a little mournful, but it's also very inviting,
Yes, it is. It's great. What sound or noise do you hate?
Well, I had to think about this, but I think my current one is, how on conference calls when two people start talking at the same time, and then
Yes.
and they think that one of them can talk a little bit longer than the other one, and then the other one will be quiet, and then they stop, and then they both start talking at the same time again.
Yes.
I think that's right now, that's my least favorite sound.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're going to probably hear that a lot more in the next few weeks, and I'm sorry about that. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Well, I really, I have done a little bit of teaching in my life, so I can see myself doing that. And then after years of loving and spending a lot of time with actors and directors and writers, I think I'd probably be a good psychotherapist.
I'm sure that is very good. Oh my gosh. So number 9 is, what profession would you not like to do?
Anything involving math.
Okay. All right. Accounting, anything. It's just
right
out there. All right. And the final pivot question is, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Oh, I had to really think about this, but I think it would be, you tried really hard.
You tried really hard. I love that. That's very good. All right, I'm gonna turn it over to the chat over here. So I'm gonna look over here at some of these questions. Oh, you guys are amazing. Let me see here. Here's one from, my graduate student. This is from Lauren Houghton Gillis. As an MT dance educator, I'd love to know what style or genre of dance you're seeing most often from choreographers right now in the audition room. Broadway dance seems quite broad stylistically right now. Any current dance audition advice would be welcomed.
Oh, that's a great question. I would say, like all artists, it would be great for dancers to be able to move across genres as much as possible. There's a tremendous amount of contemporary dance going on in the Broadway musicals right now. A tremendous amount of, hip hop influenced and just street dance influenced. So all the contemporary styles of dance have been, Broadway assimilates everything. So all those and all the great edgy street and urban dance has been kind of we're grabbing all that.
That's great. All right, this is from Madison Wexler. Thank you, Madison. Her question is, would you recommend posting on social media videos of us singing/dancing so that creative teams have something to see?
Yes, or you can put them on your websites.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good place, because that kind of creates a comprehensive place for me to have information about you. So right. I prefer that because it's a little more accessible.
Right, it's easier to find.
It's like more constant, at least in my life, to find it that way.
Right, I was going to say it's curated, but I'm not going to say that because you don't like that word.
Please don't.
All right, thank you. This is from Kathleen Wren from Syracuse. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you for making time for this, Tara, particularly for shows with contemporary scores. How often are you seeing actors audition with songs from musicals versus pop rock songs that are not from theater? And do you personally have a preference?
I don't have a preference as long as you sing something that helps us understand how you would sing our score. And then that's the main thing. The difference being that if you're singing a contemporary theater song, you might have a little more storytelling that you can share with us, as opposed to a pop song where you might not have as much of that,
Right, very much so. All right, this comes from one of my graduate students. This is from Devon Hunt. On the talk of how out-of-town auditions have become more common, can you speak to the viability of regional performance as either a stepping stone to Broadway or as a long-term career? So I guess it's people living outside of New York City.
Well, I do a lot of regional theater. I worked for, I've cast for Yale Repertory Theater for over 15 years, and we're currently working on several shows that will be done in regional theater. That's a little different from like the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, where you can like live and have a life and a whole career at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. I'm constantly searching through their rosters of actors, do they have somebody for this production of Master Harold and the Boys? So I don't see as much of that as I would like to, but I'm constantly, and I think all casting directors do, trying to educate myself about people who may be out of town. And the place where I look for it the most is with more mature actors, like those people who have, had a career in Chicago and done quite a few things there. And I may not have ever had an opportunity to audition her or seen her work, but I know that I can tell by her bio that, she's done a lot of amazing, she's worked on great texts or whatever. So I do look to the regions for as a resource to, find people that we might want to work with for regional theater and for New York too. Like I'm looking at those people for both things, and particularly mature ones.
Great. This is from Lakeisha, from Houston. This is, she's wondering about casting for plays. How does that different from the process for MT? And I guess I'd put in there film and television as well.
Well, there's sadly, there are fewer opportunities. Just there's so many more musicals, and there are just so many more jobs for young people in the musicals than there are in the plays. So I think sometimes it seems more challenging to, find your way into the casting process for the plays. I would give some of the same advice in terms of going to the EPAs. Often we find the people that we invite in to be our audition readers at the EPAs. So then, you come in and we'd hire you for the day to read opposite the actors who are coming in and to read. And that's usually a pretty educational and good experience for an early career people. And then, I would also look at, like, if you're just graduating from college and you are looking to do plays, I would look at apprenticeship programs. They have one, I think, in Louisville, and OSF, I think, has one. And so, I would look for ways to be around plays, and maybe, Williamstown has a famous apprentice program in the summer. And I think I would say, even like for people who want to be in plays in this day and age, there's a tremendous energy amongst young artists to create their own work. And that's always really exciting to see and to hear about. So I would encourage that.
That's great. This question is from Brenna Green. She says, thank you so much for speaking with us all. This is such an amazing opportunity. So thank you, Tara. My question is, where did you start in theater before you becoming a casting director? What was your journey? Did you start as a director? Did you act? What did you do before Johnson Lift? Well,
I always say I was the least successful actor I've ever met. I studied theater at Boston University for 2 years. And then I thought, wait a minute, like, I don't know, like, it was a conservatory program. And it's like, my friends were, from high school, were all going to college and telling me about like Schopenhauer. And I was like, we lie on the floor and breathe a lot, it just sort of like, I wasn't sure, I wasn't ready to be that specialized in my education. So I transferred to the liberal arts school, and my degree is in literature, actually. And so that was my degree. So when I first moved to New York, I did a lot of different things, but I did come back to, my friends were all actors and writers. And so I did kind of come back to that. And then the most significant thing was I went to work for a producer named Lester Osterman, who was a crazy, colorful guy. He had like his background was so fascinating. And that's how I met Vinny and Jeff. We were producing a play called Execution of Justice by Emily Mann, and they were the casting directors. So I got to know them from that project. So, but I studied with Peter Thompson at the Michael Howard Studio for a while, and I studied at HB for a little bit. And I'm glad that I did those things, even though I never really became an actor, because I see how I use all of that every day. I talk to actors, and I understand it a little bit.
Sure, that's a big difference. Next question is from Marcus Brooks. What is the process like when casting an actor of color in a role originated by a white actor? And as an extension, what is it like to have the dilemma of being open to diverse, non-traditional casting, but not having many actors of color come in for a certain role, and or not having actors of color that really stand out as right for a role? It's two little questions, I guess.
It's an aspect of casting diverse actors in roles that weren't necessarily written to be, a person of color, in the sense that what do we want, how do we help the actor find his way in? oftentimes it's a character where it's very easy to find your way. Anybody can find his way in, and that's. But sometimes an actor will ask for help, and so we, I rely on the director and the writer to provide that help. What was the second part? Was about
just the dilemma of wanting to go hire diverse casting and not having enough people, and or that not finding an actor that really stands out as right for the role.
Yeah, I mean, that happens. I hope that it will happen less as we do it more, because all of the, it's a function of opportunity, and it's a function of representation, right? So if the more actors of color get to play parts, the more people they'll be ready, they'll be trained up, they'll have had the opportunity to be ready for the next part. But so until we catch up with that, that's where the kind of like the deficit of people. But you just have to keep exploring, and fortunately the programs are also putting diversity at the core of their values, so that hopefully it will all catch up in the future. Does that make sense?
It does. Can you hear me right now?
I can hear you, but you're frozen on my screen.
Okay, as long as you can still hear me, then it's okay. So my computer is winding down, so let's wind down the whole thing here. So I'd like to.
My husband just came home and he has to make his martini, so we'll be hearing that in the background in a minute. All
right. Well, we're gonna close things up here. So many thanks to our today's guest, Tara Rubin. In closing here, the SDSU series begins anew on Monday, April 6th at 4 p.m. Eastern with composer Tom Kitt, followed by Broadway performer Laura Osnes on April 8th and conductor Mary Mitchell Campbell on April 10th. The series continues on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at the same time until May 6th. See our website for details. That is SDSU Studio Series.wordpress.com. And please, please, please leave your feedback on the website for us, and hope to see all of you again on Monday, April 6th. And my heart goes out to Tara. Thank you so, so, so much. Thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you everybody. It was great to do this. I'm glad to be the first.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.